This is tutorial 11 of Gulf Strike. We're going to look at some important combat interactions that occur on the strategic map. The first is a B-52 strike on a Soviet air base in the democratic Yemen. The B-52s have a range of 90 strategic hexes, and they come off the map edge. They're coming towards the air base, and so what we need to do is examine the Soviet ability to detect incoming aircraft, and for that we look here at the air base, and the Soviets are going to have a chance. Here they're going to make an attempt to detect. We assume that the detection attempt is successful. The Soviets can then fire their air defense, which they do. They have an air defense of 2, and they'd have to roll equal to or less than that number in order to register a number on the air naval combat resolution track. And the probability of that's very low, so we're going to assume they don't. And then they would scramble 2 MiG-23s, and you can see the MiG-23s here will be in intercept mode. The B-52s would be right over the airbase, and so a roll would be made. Let's assume an average roll of 5, which is 1 less than their air combat rolls, and this would cause the this would be 2 less, the 2 less category. Now, B-52s have an electronic countermeasures ability of 8, and if they made an average roll of 5, then 8 minus 5 is 3, and this would be moved up 3. 1, 2, 3, and the B-52s would not be affected at all. They would then conduct their bombardment. B-52s have a bombardment capacity of 9. If they rolled an average of 5 each, let's say one rolled 5 and one rolled 6 for an average roll of 5.5, then the first roll is a roll of 6 is 3 less, and the roll of which is then applied separately. A roll of 3 less is 1 hit, and the other roll is 5, which is 9 minus 5 is 4, is 2 hits. That's 3 hits total. You'd have 3 hits applied against the airbase, and the airbase would then be permanently destroyed. The airbase would be removed, and the aircraft would remain at the airbase until such time as the Soviets would be able to fly in another airbase to facilitate the departure of those MiG-23s. Now let's take a look at another combat situation, which is an American attack from using carrier aviation against a Soviet destroyer. Here the Soviet destroyer starts off as undetected, and one of the means by which you can detect ships at sea is the P-3 Orion, which is normally based in Diego Garcia, and it has a fairly good range. So you'd fly this, the P-3 Orion. Now the P-3 Orion has a detection range of 6 at 1 strategic hex range. Now at that range, the air defense capacity of the destroyer is within its own hex. It's a 0 hex range, so it can't affect it. Effectively, the P3 is invincible. So the P3 would have to roll for detection a 7 or less. So on average, it'll make the detection. And if the detection is made, then the carrier can launch an attack if it's close enough. Now, the attack here consists of an E6, an A6, and an A7. The E6 has excellent electronic countermeasures. The A6 is the premier anti-ship, anti-ground carrier aircraft, and the A7 is the cheaper version of that aircraft. So these 3 would then attack the destroyer. These come in as undetected, and we'd have to consult the chart. Here for the Soviet surface vessels, USSR detection, their ability to detect an aircraft at 0 is 6. So we assume that detection is made, and so the destroyer would then roll its anti-air capability, which is a 5. If it rolled an average of 5, then it would register 0. It would register a hit, which would theoretically be distributed among the aircraft. And then the U.S. Air Force would roll the highest ECM. Here it's a 7. If they rolled a 5, it would be 2 less. A roll to 5, 7 minus 2 is 2. And this would be reduced by 2, so there would be no damage on the aircraft. And then the A6 and the A7 would then conduct an attack. Now, if they rolled an average of 5, again, you'd have 2 or less from this aircraft, and which would be registered here. 2 or less, it's 2 hits. And the destroyer's got an ECM of 2, so it's a very low likelihood that it'd be able to stop that attack. And with just 2 hits, this ship would sink. It would basically be removed. Now, another important aircraft in the Soviet inventory is the Tupolev-20 Bison, which I think is also a stand-in for the Tupolev-95 Bear. And this aircraft is weak, but very important, because it's got great range and is the best maritime surveillance aircraft that the Soviets have. At a range of 1 strategic hex, it can fly and detect ships. So you can fly next to an undetected ship, which in this case could be an American aircraft carrier. And the Tupolev-20 at that range would have to roll 7 or less. So it's a very high probability of detecting the carrier. Now, whenever a detected aircraft comes within 2 strategic hex ranges, the U.S., if the aircraft is detected, they can intercept it with a CAP, a combat air patrol, which is 1 aircraft placed directly on the target, and the combat would be resolved it would be resolved. So in this case, we're going to assume that the Tupolev-20 has already made a detection attempt, or it's at the beginning of the game. At the beginning of the game, you have a Soviet cruiser which accompanies the U.S. carrier, and you'll see it's only got a 1 hit capacity, and it gets a bonus of 3, minus 3 to the die roll, which makes it far more likely to hit. So sometime near the beginning of the game, once hostilities break out, it should be used in conjunction with a surprise attack. So the U.S. Carrier should be out of the range of the Tupolev-26 backfires, which are based in Afghanistan. These have a radius of 8, but with in-flight refueling, it's 16. And so the carrier